Hello, I'm Terrence Lyons. I'm a professor at the School for Conflict Analysis and Resolution at George Mason University in Arlington, Virginia.
Now we're here at Freedom House discussing about Ethiopian politics in this election year. And you've talked about party politics in Ethiopia vis-a-vis the ruling EPRDF and the internal dynamics of EPRDF. And you said something very interesting, which is that the EPRDF is not a homogeneous entity. What do you mean by that, and what does it mean for the politics of the country?
Yeah, I think it's very important to recognize that the EPRDF is a coalition, and it's a coalition of the four ethnic parties that your viewership will well know, the Amhara, the Tigray, the Oromo, and the Southern, that are they're really quite distinct organizations, and that they have a distinct history. The TPLF has a history of engaging in the armed struggle that the Southern Party simply does not. It's just a historical fact, and so they can draw upon different narratives of legitimacy. They have different capacities. They came to power in different ways. And so in that way, it is really quite a diverse party. On the one hand, it is very strongly united. It's very hierarchical with a strong central committee. But on the other hand, it's a coalition of four very distinct components.
Now, you talked about strife within the ruling party, not so pronounced in the coverage, media coverages, and you won't see that in public, of course, and they won't talk about it. Now, let's talk about the domination of the TPLF, and you talked a little bit about that, what that means to the rest of the coalition, because this year's election marks an election without the long-time leader, Meles Zenawi. So it's interesting to see the transitional process in the country vis-a-vis the internal party politics dynamic.
Yes, what goes on within the party meetings is not known by me, and so I can't speculate about that. But I do think, to me, when I try to understand Ethiopian politics, I find it useful to see the party as more than just the TPLF, and in fact, a couple years ago, that it was more than just Meles Zenawi. It was never an individual party, as we see that the transition moved quite uneventfully without him, and that it's not just the TPLF, but it's the EPRDF and all of its constituent parties, its regional governments, its effort and rest, and all of the financial pieces. It's the mass organizations. It's there is a larger set of a system, a network of organizations that are the EPRDF. Is the TPLF the strongest part of that web or that network? Historically, that's clearly been the case. I can't assess to what extent it is today. But I think the party is much more than that, and it has it's a more complex system than just the TPLF using regional proxies, say.
Now, I was in Ethiopia covering the elections for about 3 weeks, traveled all over. And the question that we wanted to ask, from the onset, we knew that this election is going to be won by the ruling party. We just wanted to show how it would be done. What do you think contributed to the success? They have 100% of the parliamentary seats that are announced. What do you think contributed to their success, and what tools, both politically and by way of election campaigns, did the ruling party use to win the votes in a landslide?
I think that the party is a very effective mass mobilizing party, that it can get people to do what it asks them to do. That not only is it the 100% provisional results extraordinary, the levels of voter registration are incredibly high. Voter turnout is incredibly high because this is a party, a state, a regime that when the top says do something, it filters down very, very quickly and very, very authoritatively down to the kibeles, down to the small units of governance and control, and so that when it can do things like elections. The opposition, on the other hand, doesn't have those advantages. It isn't the state in the way that the EPRDF is. It doesn't have any of the financial resources, access to the media, access to the ground, access to the kind of resources that small farmers need in order to survive. And so I can could imagine a small farmer in Ethiopia trying to decide what to do on election day, and they could vote for the government, which they know is powerful and that they know is the key for them getting access to things that they need, land and fertilizer, and to get their kids into school and so on and so forth. Or they can vote for the opposition that they're certain is going to lose. And so an awful lot are going to vote for the government. It doesn't surprise me that many Ethiopians would vote for the government.
Now, let's talk about comparatively. We know the situation on the ground. Most of our listeners also live it day to day.
Sure.
They do understand the organizational structure that exists in Ethiopia in their lives, be it economic, personal, what have you. Let's talk about comparatively. This kind of systems, how do they sustain themselves regionally and elsewhere? And what tools can be used by those who oppose such regimes in order to have a meaningful participation in the political process, especially in parliament?
I think that the EPRDF and other strong authoritarian party systems are actually have the potential to last a long time, can be quite resilient, can endure, can last, because they are able to occupy the political space, occupy can control the flows of resources and the things that are needed in order to mobilize voters, and opposition parties cannot. In some cases, if you look comparatively, I'm thinking of the Kenya case, for example, KANU, President Moi's party for a long period of time, it fell in part because defectors from the ruling party formed an opposition party and were able to seize an opportunity and defeat the ruling party. So it was ex-KANU people who defeated the KANU party in multi-party elections. I don't see a similar pattern in Ethiopia. It's hard to envision something like that in the short term, but in the medium term, I'll keep my eye open for that. So in other words, it is political dynamics within the ruling party that shape the transition rather than forces from outside the ruling party.
Well, thank you very much. Hit or miss, one last question. Do you see Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn going for another 5 years?
You would be much closer to the ground and know more about that than I would. If I had to hit or miss or put my money down, I would expect that we see Hailemariam Desalegn as Prime Minister after the September party meetings.
Professor Terrence Lyons, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.